right, welcome back to another episode of Beyond Coaching. Have a maybe a guy with the most interesting background we've had on today, Colonel James Cheatham. He's been actually. I'll let you share a little bit about your background. But James, thanks for joining us, and if you can share just kind of your career progression. You've had an interesting career.
For sure. Yeah. I can't thank you enough for having me on. Honored to be on and excited about the conversation. But yes, blessed right now in a colonel role. But again, a little bit about my background: 30-year educator, um, teacher, coach, 11 years as a head football coach in high school at three different schools. Spent 4 years at college at NEO A&M Junior College, coaching as a defensive coordinator, five different public schools, and then the last 7 years at private Christian school, college prep school here in Oklahoma. But the whole time I've been a reservist, specifically an Air National Guard member, and just recently left education about 6 months ago to take a full-time temporary duty position. And so those of you maybe listening that know the military, it's just kind of like a temporary duty assignment, kind of like a deployment, but in-house, and going to spend the next 3 years on that assignment. And so blessed to be the mission support group commander right now at our installation there at Tulsa. So that's kind of a quick review.
Very good. And for those listening, we've both your boys go to Friends University where I'm at, and we've lived through some really bad football together, and then some really good football
For
over
sure.
the years. And yeah, so let's dive in. Talk about kind of what you think of the state of coaching at the high school level, and then I know you're passionate about teaching leadership through sport. Talk about the state of coaching, and then how you think we're doing teaching leadership through sport.
Well, I mean, I think that the state of coaching is very difficult arena right now, and can be volatile depending on where you're at. I mean, you know, most states are hurting for teachers and coaches, and it's because it's a tough job with the expectations that both parents and teachers have. So we need more good people doing it, and I like to say fighting a good fight in doing it. So that's kind of a summary how I'd say the stage is. What was your second question there?
Well, I mean, I think me and you are on the same page of if it's just about the sport, it's kind of a waste of time. How are we teaching life skills, developing leaders, all that kind of stuff? How effective do you see coaches in terms of developing leaders, teaching transferable leadership skills to kids?
Great point and good question. I'm passionate about that, and I don't think we're purposeful enough at doing it. I think the really good coaches and the really successful programs now at any level, I don't care if it's junior high, high school, college, they're purposeful at um, coaching leadership. I think traditionally, we take for granted the leadership skills that happen with coaching, being part of a team, dealing with the adversity of what teams go through, highs and lows, wins and losses, winning streaks, losing streaks, key players injured, things like that. We just kind of naturally take that for granted, and that is development and leadership teaching moments. But we need to be more purposeful about it in all areas.
So you spent a lot of years as an administrator. How did you work with coaches to help them be purposeful in that?
Well, I always tried to attack it from two or three, really a three-prong approach. I guess I would say, haven't thought about it too much, but one, wanted to educate coaches on how to teach leadership, but also educate them and continuously building their leadership skills.
Mhm.
Right, we got to continuously be learning, and so I was passionate about always doing things or providing information or tools to coaches that would increase their learning, improve their leadership, and then give them a second prong would be to give them data supported information, very very similar to that's what I love what you're doing with Beyond Coaching, and some of your research is that's good information that coaches need to know, and they may not have time to see that or go find that on their own. So as an administrator, you provide that information to them. Hey, here's what's going on. Here's the latest data. And then the third thing is tools to use with their athletes. Coaches again are busy, and there's a lot of good ideas out there, or a lot of good methods or formulas, but give them a tool or tools to go implement.
Yeah. I think that's what led Dustin and I, my co-founder in the Impactful Coaching Project, led us down this path where he was 24 when he became a college head coach and I was 26. And we didn't have the foggiest idea what we were doing. And
Yeah,
we couldn't really find tools out there to help us. And we had a great boss, but he's supervising 15 other coaches.
right.
And just finding those tools and getting coaches to getting them in front of coaches. But I think the other challenge, and I'm curious your thoughts, is I know I was like this as the head coach, especially a young head coach. Often you think you have all the answers. So how did you get through to those young guys? Any advice there?
Oh, great. Great question. If we could bottle that, we would be really rich, right?
No kidding.
On teaching the young coaches. But again, I think I tell you, if I could go off on a little trail here, I think some of the answer on that as an administrator is the process by which you bring them in, by how you onboard them.
Yeah.
That would be the first area that I would say, I always purposely, had the conversation about, do you have a growth mindset? Uh, Emphasizing, their weaknesses that they're willing to talk about, and talking about, hey, we want to purposely help you grow in those areas, and how they apply to our institution, to our school, to our, philosophy on how we want to do business at this at this place, wherever that is. So I think it starts there, but then again, I think it goes back to what I previously mentioned is you have to get them some data driven information, and an example might be, we might not think kids uh have a problem with cell phones, right? But then you see all the data, how much they're on it, and
Mhm.
it's like, okay, I need to address this, right?
Yeah.
And so, uh, you got to put some data in front of them that drives them to, hey, I need this stuff.
Yeah. Yeah. One way we do that here, I'm curious if you did it when you were an administrator. We do end of the year evaluations where me or another administrator gets in the room with the kids, and it's an anonymous survey.
Yes,
Um, and I hate it as a coach. Um, and most coaches are kind of uncomfortable because think, oh, this kid didn't play, he's going to rip me. And I found 99% of kids are pretty fair. And if you just ask them their input, they're going to give you some pretty good thoughts. Agree with that? Disagree with that? I'm curious.
I agree. I think, I always like to say, you can't fool kids. You
Mhm.
can't fool the student athlete. They're gonna be honest with you, and they're gonna sense, is it realistic? Are you being, transparent with them? And so they're gonna in turn give that same feedback. And I found the same. We did a lot of surveys, various surveys, and I was always looking. I'm sure you are trying to find better questions
Yes.
to ask them to get targeted information that we can apply, across the whole athletic department, and even at the institution, on making our coaches more purposeful and making it a better experience for the kids.
Yeah, because it's so challenging as a coach. We tried once, and I couldn't get it go. Just didn't get the buy-in. Didn't want to push it anymore. Of having coaches even evaluate each other, where they go to each other's practices. And I can't go out to a football practice and critique the X's and O's very well, but I can go out and look at spacing of coaches, communication, where they're standing, the general tone of the practice. And I think it, I wish there was a tool out there, and maybe we should develop it, of coaches working together and finding the time to really help each other get better, because it's so easy to lie to yourself and think everything's good.
Oh, for sure, and, that cross, sport collaboration, and education, we're gonna in the classroom, we're gonna call that co-curricular,
Yep.
right? And we're gonna work together and build a curriculum, and, I'm sure, no matter what our sport is, all of us, like listening and getting advice from some of the guys that are really good at it, that are famous, that we talk about. I don't care if you're a football coach. There's some quality basketball guys, that you can get, whether it's Coach K or Coach Knight, or things like that. So I think that's a great idea, and we should do a better job of that. And they bring different perspectives, right? To
Mhm.
to to it, and how you can lead, because you lead baseball different than you do football, than you do basketball, than you do track.
Yeah.
Uh,
I still remember my ED didn't make a practice of it in my last school when I was coaching baseball, but he came out once and he very nicely said, "Dude, you talk too much." And we ended up talking
yeah.
about it later, and I'm a pretty reserved guy. I never thought I was, but yeah, I wasn't giving them space to learn on their own because I just kept talking too much and confusing them. I feel like that's one lesson. The more years I'm out of coaching, the more I think coaches talk too much often. It's a
Oh, I'm on board with that. I think that's a number one mistake young coaches make. I've always said, young coaches a lot of times think they can talk a player into playing better or being a better athlete, and I've never seen it happen. You rep players into being better, and so talk less, rep more.
uh, curious. I didn't put this. I'm going to go off script here a little bit. I'm wondering if you can talk about. I've never talked to anybody of your background. Similarities or differences in your leadership role within the military and then in schools.
Hey,
More more
that's a great.
challenging, different? Yeah, sorry, go on.
Yeah, it's not, real different, because when you're looking at it from young people perspective, now maybe so now, as the position I'm at, militarily, because, I'm now in a role that is a higher level executive type role, that you're a leader of leaders. But definitely in my younger military career, and as what we would call a young officer, or a CGO, a company grade officer, very similar to high school coaching, and we call them student athletes in high school, and in college, and in the Air Force we call them airmen. And I don't care if they're 18, 19, 17, 18, 19 years old, and they're a high school student, college freshman or sophomore, or new to the Air Force. They have all the same characteristics, right? They're trying to learn how to navigate life, deal with difficulties, deal with tough decisions, trying to get better at their job, their tasks that they're doing. And so finding ways to communicate with them, motivate them, listen to them, and train them to get better at what they're doing, sport or a specific task. Very similar.
Very similar. Cool. Let's shift gears a little bit. Let's on this podcast we talk a lot about Generation Z, or this generation, and you got some kids with us right smack dab in that middle of generation. Um, how do you think they're the same as past generations? And then the follow up is, in what ways do you think they're different?
Well, kids are young people, and kids are kids. There's a quote out there. I love quotes, but I have to cheat and write them down and post them everywhere. Um, so I don't remember it, but I mean, this is like a second century quote, or whatever, and it talks about, they won't do they won't do their chores, and they gobble their food down. They won't listen to their parents' guidance, right?
Sounds like my kids.
Whether that was happening centuries ago, decades ago, and it's still happening today. So kids will naturally be kids. So I don't think. the nature of generations has changed that much when it comes to kind of their attitude, their general attitude towards education, going to school, being going out for athletics, things like that. I think there's a lot of similarities. You know, the differences that we like to talk about, and I think I've heard you state before that overall you agree maybe that they've changed, but it's overhyped or overstated. And I'm right there with you because there's a lot of similarities. Uh, the difference is, the one that jumps out to me that I would love to talk about or have conversations is competitiveness. I think this last generation, or since I've been in the 30 years of coaching, it seems to me that natural competitiveness, is less and less for the athlete, and we're coaching and trying to pull out and drive and push our athletes to be more competitive, go Pete, especially in an atmosphere where you get to have equal ability, right? And the teams are fairly competitively equal. They got to go compete and fight through obstacles.
So why do you think I think I agree with you, but what what do you think's caused this lack of almost just the enjoyment of getting to compete? Um,
Well, my soapbox on that one is individualized sports and overplaying.
yeah.
Overplaying. I think we talk in my debate angle is we talk a lot about excessiveness in a lot of things in life, right? You can have excessive, we know we can have excessive chocolate, right? Or whether it's excessiveness of something that's in the disease realm, and so we talk about excessive things are not good for you.
Mhm.
But I don't hear much talk about excessive sporting, excessive playing, excessive competition, which leads to, the debate of playing year round, playing as a sport year round, and year round isn't the issue. That's overstated. The issue is playing. I don't care what sport it is. Are you playing 100 competitions, right?
Mhm.
Before that. So I think the more you play and the more you lose, you learn to accept it, and it doesn't hurt as much.
Yeah. I think it's interesting. So I've been out of coaching almost 10 years, but my last few years was when, like, the showcase kinda model of baseball's coming out, where they invite all these college coaches, and we're all talking out of both ends of our mouth at the college level because it's great. You get all these players in the same spot. But the showcase was teams would play, you get 4 batters an inning, then you'd switch sides, and
Mhm.
everybody play. So, you're showing off your skills, but there's no element of competition that's part of it, and I I see that at our level where coaches are having to teach more how to practice, um, just because kids are playing so much, and you talk about data points, here's an interesting one where one of the questions we ask all our kids every year is we ask them if practices are motivating, if they're productive, and I can't remember the last one off the top of my head, and 2 or 3 years ago, that number dipped a little bit, and I think it came down to how we were motivating and how we were adapting our kids, and that number shot up when we started talking about it, and it was just we didn't adapt and understand, I think, the environment kids were coming from, and realizing we had to teach them how to practice and motivate them to do that just because that's not the world they're coming from.
Yeah, I totally agree with you, and you make a good point when you start talking about teaching athletes how to practice. I mean, uh, we have to do that, especially when we was at the college level, but even at the high school level, because we would say at the high school level, they've been playing through little league, right? And I'm not trying to beat up on little league. There's a lot of good little league coaches out there, but again, not a competitive focus in practice, and they're just kind of doing drills and going through motions to try to build some specific skills so the kid can perform during the game.
So last question on this generation, but you talk about no marshmallows. So how do we lead in a way to build resilience and have don't have marshmallows?
Yeah. Well, that's a passion of mine and kind of a saying I've done off and on for a long time. And my most recent job there at OBA with 7 years, I've kind of become, some kids or other coaches like to take it and run with it, but it's a passion of mine to say, "Hey, you can't be soft, you can't be," "we can't be a marshmallow," and a lot of times, when coaches say that, I found that, parents or other people automatically think you're talking physical softness, right?
Mhm,
But really, we're talking, all of it and more specifically, mental and emotional, uh, softness, needing the mental and emotional resiliency.
mhm,
And also, in the areas that we've worked, we'd also, from a faith-based perspective, we talk about, being spiritual, having spiritual resiliency
yeah,
also. And so I believe that as coaches, to prevent our kids from being marshmallows, what I would say is we got to work hard at um, making them resilient in those areas. So how do we, so how do we do that? Well, going back to military term, there's nothing like live fire, right? You got to be live in the action. You can talk about bombs and bullets and what the damage they can do and what they sound like, but until you're up close and personal with hearing it and seeing the damage, touching the damage, you get a taste of it. So, we want to get as realistic as possible in our training militarily. Well, as a coach, we got to get as purposeful and realistic in what a student athlete is going to deal with, and it's not just the physical part and the skill part. We got to be able to deal mentally, emotionally, and spiritually with the tough situations that we go in. So we got to create scenarios on purpose and put that type of training into play. You were talking about practice. That's part of purposeful practice, right? As an educator, we have lesson plans. Every good coach has a solid um, plan for the week, has a solid game plan, has a solid practice plan. Well, we in those practice plans have to be purposeful leadership training that in turn also addresses what I call softness.
that's well said, and, yeah, we're even talking here, we haven't put it into play, but, like, for me, most of the issues I deal with coaches are when they react poorly in that emotional moment. It isn't X's and O's, it's when they get challenged by a kid, they cower or they overreact, um, and how do you train coaches for that moment? It gets even more complex because, I mean, one thing I dread is a coach having that moment they can't come back from, where they act so poorly, and
Right.
they're good people, but the emotional moment kinda gets away from them. It's a
Hey, that's a great point, and I agree with you totally. I've been there. I'm sure
Me
you have
too.
too. I could on a whole 'nother podcast, we could talk about the mistakes and overreaction that I have made. I think a quick way to help coaches and all of us in leadership is you purposely talk about those moments and you reflect on, man, I messed up, and how can I do better? And you get coaches to start trying to learn from their mistakes instead of, a lot of times as a young or immature coach, oh man, I'll own it, but then I just want to forget about it and move on.
Yeah. And I think, yeah, if I had advice for young coaches, one is, keep it short after a game and get out of there when you're emotional, because you're only gonna say stuff you regret that's probably not helpful, and then go back and apologize when you screw up. I think
Yeah.
I think kids respect it. I know I do.
I agree, and that's the toughest thing to do. That took me a while, maybe 10 years
Yeah,
to do that and have the transparency and confidence enough to just stand in front of kids and say, "Hey, I messed up.
yeah,
I owe you an apology, and I need to do better, and I wanna do better for you guys, let's go."
yep, yep. It's a powerful moment. Alright, one more question, then we'll finish up with a rapid fire round. So it sounds like you're a data geek, kinda like I am. Um, when you look at the scope of leadership and coaching, is there anything you'd like to see researched that you don't think is getting enough focus?
Man, uh, I couldn't, put one thing down. I think there's a lot of things out there. I mean, the first thing that comes to my mind is really what you mentioned earlier, and that is, uh, there's a lot of I think there's a lot of research out there on philosophy and methodologies, but there's not enough specific tools
Hmm.
to give coaches. So, what kind of research based tools can we have, or just go back to a lot of the things that's already been done research wise? Okay, how can we apply this? But then, kind of along those same lines, my passion has been going back to marshmallowness is you know uh, how does grit help us, and obviously Dr. Duckworth is very popular, um, on that study and her book on grit and everything. But she was kind of the forefront on that, and I guess everybody thinks that was enough. I haven't seen any additional, you know, grit specific because it's so hard to define, right? And how we can do a better job of coaching that, teaching that, and the tools to do that.
I like that. Cool. All right. Well, we'll finish up with the rapid fire round. So you have no longer than 30 seconds to answer any of these.
Okay.
Here we go. So, what is one book that has greatly influenced your life and why?
Well, Point Man, it's an old one. You probably know it, Steve Farrar.
Hmm.
Great book. It's been redone a couple times, but it's just a great, solid book, especially for I believe, a young coach, a young man on how to just be faithful and lead and learn to lead and love, as a man. So that's one that's definitely been um, influential. I can't talk about books without throwing in there from a leadership perspective. You can't talk leadership without Five Dysfunctions of a Team.
Right.
Love that book. After I was introduced to it, everywhere I've been, I've used it in some form or fashion to help teach coaches and teach our team.
I'm a Lencioni geek myself. He's fantastic. Um, how has a failure set you up for later success?
Well, resiliency. I don't know how coaches do it, right? Everybody wants it, that's in coaching wants to be a winner, and I was blessed as a young coach, as a young assistant coach for the first 6 years of my career. We won a lot of games, won a lot of conference championships and things like that. But when I become my first head coaching job, I was 0-5 trying to figure out if we could win,
Mm.
and just going through difficulty and not quitting. You just got to keep grinding. And you know, I had plenty of failures from a season perspective, and you just got to keep. It definitely made me better.
Cool. Other than this one, what's your favorite podcast?
Well, obviously, you give you a shout out, right? Even though I've only since we've been at Friends and knowing about your podcast, but Craig Rochelle, I'm a big Rochelle leadership podcast fan. I think he does a great job. But the other one I'm big on is building championship mindsets. I don't know if you know that one, or Dr. Selke,
Okay.
the
No.
sports psychologist. Um, she does seasons, but it's great. It's short and to the point, very much like yours. She keeps it about 15 minutes and always gives you a tool to go apply.
Nice. How do you define success in your work?
Well, again, another quote that I've always liked, I think it's from President Eisenhower, General Eisenhower, getting something similar, getting people to do, what they may not want to do and like doing it.
Mm.
And when you see that happen, I think that's success, because you're driving them to reach a goal that they might have not thought they could reach. So seeing them reach those levels.
In the last 5 years, what new belief, behavior, or habit has most improved your life?
Well, you can't read enough, and I feel like the older I'm getting, I'm more disciplined at reading, and so the more I read, I feel like the better I am, and so just improving that, and how to improve. But I don't think you can also talk about improvement without talking about some sort of health perspective. And definitely, there's something to be said about eating right, eating well. My sons have taught me a lot in that area, and eating whole foods and organically, and just what you put in your body matters.
Nice. Well, I really appreciate you taking the time. I've learned a lot in the last 30 minutes.
Well, I can't thank you enough for blessing me with the opportunity. I really, when I learned about your your research and everything, I mean, again, that I kind of geek out on that and motivation, and that's awesome work you're doing. And then started listening to your podcast and hearing some of your guests and highly qualified individuals. I'm thankful. I met the qualifications to make it on.
Very good. Well, you conclude kind of a three-week series with pretty accomplished high school administrators and coaches. So thanks
Awesome.
again for the time and appreciate you and your family.
Yes. Thank you guys. Go Falcons.
Thank you for listening to another episode of Beyond Coaching. Beyond Coaching is a podcast developed and produced by the Impactful Coaching Project with the support of Friends University. The Impactful Coaching Project seeks to develop coaches that coach the whole person and is the thought leader in coaching the 21st century athlete. The Impactful Coaching Project produces training, information, and research to help coaches improve. To see more information, go to impactfulcoachingproject.substack.com. Thank you.